Listen closely. Before any story begins, there is a hush where three voices meet: confession, praise, and demand. In that hush, a question waits for those who feel more than they can explain. What if your empathy, your finest human inheritance, has become an unseen power supply? What if the warmth you offer is routed into systems that do not love you, into patterns that only grow hungrier the more you feed them? This is not a superstition. It is a psychological reality described in another language by Carl Jung. He warned that the psyche does not end at the edge of awareness. Beneath the surface live figures and forces, shadowed impulses, polished masks, borrowed myths that press on behavior. Empaths, exquisitely tuned to pain and meaning, become luminous to these forces. People can use that light, institutions can monetize it, and the unconscious can conscript it when we are asleep to our own depths. Consider the map we will follow. First, the mask, the persona that wins approval by being endlessly good, and the way that mask advertises free access. Second, the basement, the shadow we deny, where unowned anger and need drip like a leaking valve, draining energy in the name of virtue. Third, the temple, archetypal currents that take compassion and mint it into currency for movements, brands, and causes that demand everything while calling it love. The stakes are not theoretical. They are counted in exhaustion that lingers, in moral injury that blurs right and wrong, in the hollowing that comes when empathy is an open circuit with no switch. This is Jung's final warning as care. Your light is sacred and it requires structure. So ask yourself, if empathy is electricity, who built the grid? If care is warmth, where is the thermostat and whose machine is your light powering? Empathy is not a costume. It is a nervous system tuned to the tremors of other lives. When you feel the weather of a room before words are spoken, you are reading more than behavior. You are reading fields. Jung gives language to those fields. He describes a psyche composed not only of conscious intentions, but of autonomous patterns, complexes that grip, archetypes that organize, a persona that negotiates, and a shadow that houses what has been denied. This map matters now because the world has learned how to monetize attention and mobilize feeling, and empaths carry more of both. When compassion is abundant but structure is thin, the line between love and exploitation blurs. The stakes are intimate, exhaustion that sleep cannot cure. A moral injury that arrives when you keep saying yes, while a quieter truth says no. The slow hollowing that comes from performing goodness instead of living wholeness. The path forward is not withdrawal into cynicism. Jung's final warning is an invitation to adulthood of soul individuation. It asks you to build a life where care is chosen, not compelled, where your boundaries are not fences against love, but the architecture that allows love to last. This documentary will travel from the interior landscape to the social machinery and back again. You will see why the persona can become a billboard for takers, how shadowed anger leaks energy, how archetypes recruit your story, and how modern systems harvest the very light that makes you human. The promise is clear: a way to remain kind without becoming consumed, to be as discerning as you are compassionate, and to keep your empathy from being converted into someone else's fuel. The persona is the social mask that lets you move among others without friction. It is useful. It is necessary. And for many empaths, it is polished to a shine. The identity is simple and noble, dependable, safe, endlessly available. Approval arrives quickly when you live there. Gratitude becomes the air you breathe. Yet the mask has a cost. It requires constant power to keep it lit, and the easiest battery to drain is your own life. When the persona fuses with identity, kindness becomes obligation. You agree before you have felt. You offer before you have asked yourself what is true. Takers, whether deliberate or unconscious, recognize the pattern. Predictable, yes; immediate access, no price. They do not feed on virtue. They feed on predictability. The trap tightens because the mask flatters. You are admired. You are needed. You are the reliable one, until reliability conceals resentment and fatigue. The inner self fades from view, and the outer performance runs the day. The way out begins with disidentification. You are not your mask. You can retain warmth while refusing the script that equates goodness with erasure. Practice delayed consent. Let requests cool before answering. Replace the silent contract. I will always be here, as with a living agreement. I will be here when I truly can. The persona can return to its rightful size, a garment worn, not a skin fused. Approval is released from its throne. Integrity takes its place. You will still be kind. The difference is that kindness will be a choice rooted in reality, not an addiction to being seen as good. What you exile does not vanish. It bargains. When anger, ambition, need, or grief are cast out to maintain a self-image of perfect benevolence, they do not dissolve. They switch marketplaces. They transact through symptoms: fatigue that follows every yes, quiet bitterness that stains a generous act, compulsive rescuing that conceals the need to be indispensable. This is the shadow market, and its currency is unspoken feeling. Anger in particular goes underground for many empaths because it threatens the identity of the gentle one. But anger's original function is boundary detection. When felt and named, it says, "Something matters here. Protect it." When denied, it becomes sabotage. It leaks as martyrdom, passive aggression, sudden eruptions that frighten even you, or the numbness that follows a life lived against itself. Takers do not require malice to find your leak. They only need the signal that you will overgive to avoid confronting the discomfort of saying no. Integration changes the market. Begin with sensation, not story. Notice the tightening in the jaw, the heat in the chest, the restless mind scanning for an exit. Let that data count. Translate charge into request. I can do this on Thursday for 1 hour. I'm not available for that. If this proceeds, these conditions must be met. You have not become cruel. You have become clear. In Jung's terms, what is made conscious becomes fate no longer. Anger reclaimed is not a weapon, it is a guardrail. Your empathy stops being a leaking faucet and becomes a river with banks broad enough to hold its strength. Beneath personal stories are older patterns, archetypes like the mother, the hero, the victim, the savior. They are not characters you invent. They are currents you enter, moods that move through culture and people with a force that feels larger than choice. When enough attention and emotion feed a shared image, it can behave like a quasi-entity, what some traditions call an egregore. You sense this when a cause, brand, or community speaks with a single glowing voice and asks for more than reason can justify. For empaths, the savior-victim axis is especially magnetic. The heart recognizes pain and aches to relieve it. Archetypal possession begins when a noble impulse inflates into a total identity. You are the rescuer who must never rest, or the wounded one whose story must never evolve. Institutions and movements learn to dress in these symbols. They invite devotion with moral certainty and label boundary as betrayal. Compassion then becomes currency. The more you feel, the more you owe. The antidote is symbolic literacy. Ask not only, is this good, but what pattern is recruiting me? Notice the inner weather of possession, a righteous clarity that annihilates nuance, a guilt at the mere thought of resting, an inability to imagine goodness outside the group's script. Individuation does not reject archetypes. It relates to them. You can serve values without being swallowed by images. You remain a person in a field, not a function of a god you cannot name. In that stance, empathy is devotion with edges, an offering given by a free soul, not a tithe paid to a hungry idea. Complexes are emotionally charged clusters, patterns formed around early experiences and repeated meanings. They are not defects. They are habits of feeling and thought that seize the wheel when touched. And I must be needed to be loved. Complex accelerates the yes before you have located yourself. An abandonment complex makes ordinary silence feel like catastrophe. A caretaker complex, so often praised, can become a self-erasure routine triggered by anyone who arrives with urgency. Manipulators, whether deliberate or simply adept at survival, learn to find the switch. They alternate warmth and withdrawal to toggle your belonging complex. They present desperation to trigger your savior reflex. They praise your goodness to strengthen your identification with the persona that gives them access. You may sense something is off, yet the old story is faster than your contemporary wisdom. By the time you reach it, the agreement is made. The discipline here is to slow the moment of consent. The speed of the yes is data. If your answer arrives before your breath, you are likely answering from a complex. Practice a pause that cannot be bargained away. I'll let you know tomorrow. I need to check my commitments first. I'll think about the right way to help. Then watch what happens. Healthy relationships tolerate delay. Systems built on extraction escalate pressure. Naming the complex out loud to yourself further disarms it. My belonging story is activated. When the hook is seen, it cannot set as deeply. You remain capable of love, but the lever others once pulled now meets a hand that chooses. Jung warned that the greatest dangers are psychological, not earthquakes or floods, but collective moods that seize populations, what he called psychic epidemics. In the last century, propaganda matured from blunt slogans into sophisticated atmospheres. The method is simple. Saturate the senses with images and phrases until familiarity feels like truth. Then anchor the campaign in moral emotion. To question becomes cruelty. To comply becomes care. Empaths are vulnerable here not because they lack intelligence, but because conscience is vivid. They do not want to be unkind. When sentiment is staged to sanctify policy, dissent feels like harm. The machinery exploits that hesitation. Repetition creates recognition. Recognition yields trust. Trust relaxes scrutiny. Soon, ritualized displays of compassion mask aggression, and participation becomes a test of goodness rather than a decision about reality. The corrective is not to numb yourself against suffering. It is to keep one foot anchored in interiority while you step into the square. Ask, am I being asked to feel in order to stop thinking? Is complexity being replaced by absolutes? Does this movement permit questions without shaming? The point is not to withdraw from the world, but to refuse the fusion that makes private conscience an instrument of public manipulation. When the individual remains awake, the group cannot so easily become a beast. Jung's warning was not a prophecy of doom, but a reminder of responsibility. Stand in your own life while you stand with others, lest your empathy become a wire in someone else's circuit. Not all exploitation wears armor. Some of it wears serenity. In certain spiritual and therapeutic subcultures, discomfort is renamed low vibration, grief is labeled a failure of practice, and anger is treated as a sign you have more work to do before you deserve belonging. This is spiritual bypass, the use of elevated language to avoid the raw work of being human. It trains empaths to mute precisely the energies, grief, anger, ambivalence, that generate honest boundaries. The economy is simple: purity codes plus a leader who absorbs projection. The leader's persona becomes a mirror for your longing and a solvent for your doubt. Early encounters may truly heal. That is part of the gravity. But over time, demands expand while language narrows. If you name a limit, you are told your ego is resisting. If you question accounting, you are told money is just energy. Dissent becomes pathology. The community's unity depends on your silence. Individuation cuts through with a homely criterion: reality first. Feeling is not a pollutant to be purified. It is information to be metabolized. Anger, grief, and conflict are not enemies of love. They are often its guardians. A trustworthy path does not fear complexity. It allows you to say no without exile. It reveals how power and money move. It celebrates your becoming a person among persons, not a satellite orbiting an image. In that ecology, your empathy is not harvested, it grows. We now inhabit systems that treat attention as extractable ore. Platforms learn what keeps you engaged and refine your feed to trigger it faster. Outrage, threat, and sentimental urgency are efficient levers. For empaths, this is a perfect storm. The nervous system is already tuned to other states, and the feed ensures there are always more states to feel. Rest begins to resemble neglect. Logging off feels like abandonment. You carry the world in your pocket, and it keeps calling you good when you never put it down. Jung's lens clarifies the pattern. Archetypes now animate timelines. Savior threads gathering an army of helpers, witch hunts assembled in hours, victimhood competitions where pain becomes status. These fields reward intensity over nuance. The more you feel publicly, the more the system feeds you reasons to feel again. Compassion becomes content. Content becomes currency. The loop tightens. The counter practice is friction. Install delay where the system removes it. Time box your exposure to distressing material and honor the end of the box. Replace infinite scroll with chosen sources. Ask before sharing, am I amplifying clarity or forwarding charge? Measure contribution by outcomes you can name, not by the volume of your emotions. Notice the two illusions that keep empaths captured: the belief that if you stop, the world will burn, and the belief that if you feel it all, you have helped. Neither is true. Help is specific. Love requires recuperation. Attention is the bloodstream of your psyche. Guard it as you would your blood. Individuation is not an abstract destiny. It is a daily craft. It asks you to build a rhythm that lets empathy flow without erasing you. Begin with a brief shadow check-in. Each morning, locate yourself in the body before the world arrives. Where is there tightness, heat, or numbness? Name the day's dominant feeling without judgment. Ask, where am I likely to leak energy? Awareness here is not introspective indulgence. It is preventative maintenance. Design boundaries in advance, not in the heat of request. Establish office hours for emotional labor and keep them. Draft a compassion budget. How many causes, how many hours, how many people receive your focused care this week? Budgets do not cheapen love. They preserve it. Prepare templated responses that honor care while protecting time. I'll circle back on Friday. That's beyond my capacity right now. Here's a resource that may help. Pre-commitment is a gift to your future self. Practice projection recall. When strong judgments arise, idealization or contempt, write the trait down. Ask, where in me does this live and how is it disowned? Reclaiming a disowned quality, even a noble one, loosens compulsion. Then turn toward anger alchemy. When charge spikes, move from story to request. Instead of litigating motives, name conditions. I need clarity on scope. I will participate if expectations are explicit. My availability is X. Anger, rendered into structure, becomes a clean yes or no. Build symbolic hygiene. Mark endings and beginnings so your psyche knows when to rest. Close the browser with a breath. Wash your hands after heavy conversations. Place a small object on your desk that you touch before consenting to new commitments. A tactile reminder that you will answer as a person, not as a reflex. Finally, choose a community of differentiation. People and spaces that tolerate your no, reward nuance, and celebrate rest. In such company, empathy is not a performance. It is a relationship between equals, including the one you hold with yourself. Extraction often announces itself if you know the signs. Red flags include urgency that forbids reflection, moral blackmail framed as care. If you really cared, you would. Contempt for ambiguity, secrecy around power and money, leaders who cannot be questioned, and peers who respond to boundaries with shame or silence. A single flag is a prompt to slow down. Several together indicate a structure that eats light. Green flags are quieter, invitations that respect pace, transparent accounting of decisions and resources. Consent as culture, not as a legalism. Leaders who model self-limitation and admit error. Communities where dissent is metabolized rather than punished. Where your no earns respect and where your rest is celebrated. Test systems, not only stories. Ask for time to consider. Set a small pilot boundary and observe the reaction. Reality reveals itself under the modest pressure of your agency. Out of these observations, articulate your own ethics of empathy. Commit to care that preserves differentiation. Write a one-page creed of non-negotiables. Time windows for availability, financial thresholds that trigger reflection, values that outrank urgency, practices that renew you when you serve. Jung's ethic is a North Star. Choose wholeness over the performance of goodness. Wholeness can sustain goodness because it includes the energies, clarity, anger, grief, rest, that keep love truthful. When ethics are explicit, manipulation has fewer places to hide. Return to the central vow. Your light is not a public grid, it is a hearth. You have seen the landscape, the mask that invites access, the shadow that leaks, the archetypes that recruit, the complexes that hook, the systems that harvest, and the practices that return power to your hands. Jung's final warning was never a threat. It was a blessing with teeth. It insists that compassion without structure becomes an offering to machines. It asks you to become the kind of adult whose love is strong because it is chosen. Keep the arc close. When praise arrives for your availability, remember the person beneath the role. When anger flickers, treat it as a boundary light, not a moral failure. When a cause speaks in absolutes, step back until you can hear your own conscience. When the feed demands your vigilance, measure impact rather than intensity. When community calls you home, check whether home includes your freedom to refuse. Carry 3 questions into the weeks ahead. Where does your yes arrive faster than your awareness? What single boundary, honored for 30 days, would change your energy more than any affirmation? Which archetypal script keeps recruiting your empathy? And how will you step out of costume without stepping out of love? The future you are building is not colder for having edges. It is warmer because the flame is tended. Keep it, protect it, share it as you choose.